Hey everybody, I am going to work on the second installment of Matt the Kerr's line of questioning, asking about me and the Ogre Compound and coaching and those things. And one of his questions, I believe it was actually the actual first question, was when did I know that this life was for me? And the initial answer is actually relatively simple. The answer is I didn't know. I'm not exactly sure of the time frame date-wise. I want to say sometime in 1999. I met Jim Ingram, who had been a power lifter for some time and been a judge. Mainly was judging NASA meets, and had trained with Doc Crease and Chuck Braxton, and literally a who's who back in the what they called the heyday of powerlifting in the 80s and early 90s. This area was a hotbed of powerlifters. Murfreesboro area, Oak Ridge, Nashville, Memphis. There was a lot of really good lifters. Like my second meet, Mona Overstreet was one of the judges. So there's a lot of history there, and I can get into the names another time. Just people that, if you're interested in the history of the sport, there is a lot of people that trained in this area and that were from Tennessee that were really, part of the best of that era. Anyway, Jim and I met through a mutual friend whose name was Pete Peden, who recently passed away, God rest his soul. And Pete is part of the reason why I started writing and how I started running meets. And I'll get into that another time. We can go into some of the history, or maybe I can come back to it if I'm not any more long-winded than I usually am. Anyway, I met Jim, and we trained at a private gym in downtown Nashville. There was no membership. I mean, you literally had to know the people that had a catering company. And most of the time it was just Jim and I. And to tell you what it was like, we had the old school squat stands that were basically car jacks with welded hooks and wheel hubs as the base, and an old Texas power bar. And we had a platform to squat on, lots of plates. As a matter of fact, the giant A-frame that you see in my leg area where the monoliths are, that came from that gym and was donated by Jim Ingram. And so a lot of history there. And I don't know the timeline specifically. I was training for my first world meet in 1999, and Jim, as per usual, and I was warned, would be late. And at the time I had no patience for that kind of crap, so I just moved on. And I saw Jim again in October of 1999 as part of training, just kind of getting more experience. I did the NASA Regional, which was held here in Nashville. And that's when he said he was ready to be serious about training. And he was. And we trained at that private gym some. And at the time it was called Gaines Fitness. And I think at that point, Chris Gaines owned it. I went back as far back in that gym and trained there for years and years. When the original owner that I knew, it had been a gym prior, but Brad Gaines owned it. And that's where I got my first real powerlifting coaching, was from Brad and then from Chris. So anyway, that was 1999. And Jim and I started training together, and the training group, as you guys see it and know it, that was the beginning. I used to train by myself, and fortunately had a lot of supportive situations. There was 2 gyms that I trained at. Both now are gone. The first one was downtown, and it was just called the Downtown Athletic Club, and the owner's son-in-law would hand off to me and taught me a lot of things, making sure I had my straps on right and so on and so forth. And there was a very supportive cast of people there. And this was before I really got into any gear. My first real bench shirt that I ever had, Larry Forsyth gave to me, and that's a name that you should look up. Larry was someone that I would train with from time to time and was considered the big super heavyweight in the area, and we used to think he was so huge. I think he weighed between 330 and 340 when I was eating and training, trying to eclipse 280 pounds. And big squat, he had a lot of big lifts. I met Larry at my first competitive powerlifting meet in 1997, and back then he was benching in the mid 500s in a shirt, which was at that particular time was just nuts. Anyway, so fast forward, it's probably 2000, and Jim meets one of these girls in the gym. Her name is Kim Leeper, and she wants to get into powerlifting. Now, Kim at the time was about 105 pounds soaking wet, and I really wasn't interested in coaching and was kind of skeptical because I was like, this will never last. And I knew that she would become my responsibility, and that's exactly what happened. And that is how it all kind of started. From there, we had some people gravitate in, and it wasn't long after a friend of mine introduced me to Chris Wink, and she had an injury from soccer, and she'd gone through rehab, but I did some lifting rehab with her and helped her range of motion. And there were friends and stuff that joined, and that's how the coaching thing really started. I had Johnny's wife, Lee, Chris, Kim, and Rebecca, and I coached those 4, and Lee and her husband, Johnny, moved to Houston, and I coached the other 3 in several meets, and that is how all of that started, me coaching. I did their programming. It was some of the basis of what we currently do and use. That's where all of that started. And I had been working with doing a lot of back and forth with Tom McCullough and a few others, and then Bob Schaefer when we both wrote for Power Mag. It was never something that I just sought out like, I am going to be a powerlifting / strength kind of coach guy. It just was never part of the deal. As far as my thinking, I wanted to total 2,000 pound and win a world championship, and then I thought that would be, the apex of my career. And I knew I would want to have some sort of place to train, but I never anticipated even having, what I have. I used to dream about, one day maybe I could have a monolift, and I started running meets. I started helping running meets in 2000. That's when all that started. And Pete gave me a pair of squat stands, and his friends at MTSU gave me some more. So they're spread out everywhere. I think there's a pair at Poe's Gym. I think a pair ended up with Josh and Melissa Kylo on their farm in Fayetteville. And then we still have a pair that we've used as recently as this past year with Melissa doing like log press work from the rack. And so, all the way back from 2000, Pete gave me a bunch of plates and was really into Wes. Wes was like 11 at the time, and he would come, he was living with his mother at the time, he'd come to the gym that Pete managed, which was Gaines Fitness, and Pete was really into him and helped us out a great deal. Helped out at the meet that we did at Friendship Christian. That was 2000. I'm not exactly sure the timeline, and that is exactly how all that started. And then I'll go back to a little back when I was training for Worlds. I had done some NASA meets and met a group of guys. The two main ones were Larry Contratti and Josh Moore, and they were both students at Vanderbilt. The other guys I've kind of lost track of. Larry, I see posts from him and hear from him time to time on Facebook. He's long graduated and moved away. Josh has graduated, went on to grad school. Long story short, Josh is married now and has been married and is a professor out at Vanderbilt. And so I don't remember exactly how we met or how it came to be, but they asked me to be their coach for the Vanderbilt Powerlifting Club. And so alongside with the girls, that's how that all came to be. It actually, in the timeline, now that I think about it, Larry and Josh and that crew of guys, that was the first group of guys that I trained. And I remember I have this conditioning cycle that, again, we currently use today. And I remember Larry doing it, and we did like a mock meet one morning at the gym, like in a 2-hour period of time. He did all 3 lifts and like just annihilated his PRs. And that's where the genesis of the coaching started. And then Jim and I, all about that same timeline in 1999, that's how all that started. So when did I know that it was the life for me? Again, it was not something that I ever chose, and it was something that was cultivated in 2006. I was single. It was just Wes and I, and we had done a bunch of work to what is now the gym. It's the upper body, the bench area in the very back, and most of the gym was relegated into the central area where the dumbbells are, some of the cardio gear is, and the power racks are, where we do most of our declining and assistance type pressing. And I had 3 clients. Matt, I can't think of his last name. He was a football player out at Friendship Christian. G.L. Waynick, whose family, his father, I bought that house from where the Ogre compound is. And then Lynn Odom, who is one of my dearest friends of my entire life, I can't even say enough nice things about all of them. The Waynick family, they're my family. I'd take a bullet for those people. Lynn is one of the most precious people I know. And those are the people that set up the foundation. I was just trying to help out and thought I'd make a few extra bucks because it was just Wes and I, and he was in high school, and I was trying to get him graduated and through his senior football season and getting ready to go to massage therapy school. And times were tough. And so that allowed us to make a little extra money and help make ends meet. And so I never envisioned what you see today. Bob stayed on me for the longest time to set up a profile on bodybuilding.com. He thought that would be a good thing for me, and I just never followed through with it. And then if you guys remember Jeremy, he was Black Spit on bodybuilding.com. He just abruptly stopped posting. But he encouraged me and convinced me to start a training log. And long story short, that is how I met Thad, who is NC Tar Heel, and Matt Morton. And I can't remember what Matt's bodybuilding.com handle was, but that's been roughly between 4 and 5 years ago. And that is how a lot of the online training, that was really how all that started. Between that and people that would listen to the podcast that I did on Superhuman Radio, I picked up a few clients from that. And it was really a struggle at first because I'd never done it before, and structure was really tough. I wasn't very organized, and so a lot of times people were emailing me looking for their sessions, and I'm like, I'm still trying to develop how I'm going to send all this stuff. And it took a year to iron the kinks out, but I think we've got a really good system now. And that's how all that started. I never envisioned, I think I do online, I email 27 people, and that it started with one, with that, and that's how it's grown. There's been people that have come and gone, and every now and then it's just not a fit, or you've got others that kind of come in for a while and leave for a while. Sometimes, even though it's something that I feel like is very affordable, it's just not financially feasible. And sometimes people just don't like how I coach, and that's okay. That's I'm not for everybody, and there's no one way out there to do it absolutely the right way. You gotta find what works. And I've been very blessed to have so many of you, feel like what I do works, and that the structure works for you, and so forth. So I keep trying to get better at it. I don't know if this is answering any questions, but with Coach's Eye, better computers, I upgraded like late last year. I upgraded my travel laptop, and we're working on some things like Matt Kerr and I, about how to do some things online. We'd done a chat on something, I don't remember what format, and he posted it on YouTube. But we're going to do some more stuff like that, maybe some podcast kind of stuff. Jennifer and I have talked about it, but Matt, Harry, Matt Kerr, a bunch of us doing like a round table, just asking questions and maybe doing a bourbon review or something like that. But anyway, that's basically how it all started. I bought the first bar for the gym in 2001, and we've not used that bar in years, but I still have it. It's in a rack, and I believe it is a 60-pound. I want to say it's a Passanella copy, and we used it for squat and bench. I actually bought it from Carl Seeker after the 2001 WPA Worlds in Lancaster. I remember Jim and I left Nashville. God, it was super early, like on a Thursday, and drove straight through the 12-13 hours to get there. Spent the night. I think we spent a day kind of chilling out and eating. We lifted, packed all of our stuff, and drove back that night. So, the early days, shit I would not do now. I wouldn't drive 12 hours to a meet if you held a bazooka to my garage. But that was then, and we were both really hungry, especially me, and there's some great stories to be told. Anyway, I hope that gives you an idea. It was the first gym that Jim and I trained together, there was no heat or air. We would occasionally have a propane heater in the wintertime, and it would get so cold the bar would actually burn your hands. And so we finally decided we would train at the commercial gym. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the genesis of me becoming a coach and how the gym got started and how even the training got started. So hopefully that didn't bore you to tears and you enjoyed that. And again, I hope that this will create some discussion. So cheers.